Located at 267 West Center Street in the heart of downtown Marion, is now accepting applications from adults, students, and seniors. The Harding Center is a beautiful historic building offering one-bedroom apartments and efficiencies at affordable rental rates. All utilities are included. Basic cable and internet are available. The Harding Center is equipped with an on-site laundry facility for its residents. The property is located on the Marion City Transit bus line, and off-street parking is available. The Harding Center is managed by Starfish Building, LLC, Lois J. Fisher and Associates. For more information, contact them at hardingcenter@gmail.com or give them a call at 740-223-3288. The Harding Center, a beautiful place to live in the heart of downtown
Sargent's
Marion.
Greenscapes is a full-service lawn and landscape company located in Marion, Ohio. We specialize in making your home a beautiful place to enjoy your time. Fall is here, and that means the leaves are falling. This year, let Sarge and the troops clean up that mess for you. We have the equipment and strong backs to handle any amount of leaves you may have. So sit back, relax, and let us take care of everything. Mention that you heard about us on Scott Spears Now and receive 5% off any service. Also, ask about our senior citizen and veterans discounts. From landscaping to lawn care, mowing to leaf removal, Sarge and the troops can give you an outdoors to make your country proud. Find us on Facebook or call 740-751-5207.
This is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Scott Spears Now. Today, the topic, something that's been going on, I know you know about it. It is the government shutdown. At the time of this taping, the government shutdown is in its 6th day. Started on October 1st, 2013. Currently, it is October the 6th, 2013, and there is no close in sight. Joining me to discuss this issue is Marion resident Tom Oyster. He's no stranger to this program. Tom, good to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Good to be here again.
Tom, this is a national issue, but certainly affects people on the local level. I do want to run down a few things here because I don't, if you don't watch the news channels, like you may not know what this has done. National parks are closed. The WIC program, it looked like they were going to shut down on Tuesday without money, but that has been extended through the end of October, as it is right now. Millions of veterans are not receiving benefits if we go over 2 weeks, which again, something could happen. Hopefully it will. Head Start programs could start closing. Statue of Liberty's closed. That's very ironic. And for every week the government has shut down 10 children who are applying for cancer trials. The trials will not begin, those clinical trials, because the program is not being funded. And this all heads to October the 17th, when the government ceiling, the debt ceiling, will come up. And October the 17th, if we do not raise that ceiling, Treasury has about $30 billion on hand, and that's enough to cover just a few days. And that is what's going on. Tom, what do you think? Oh, and by the way, this is all caused, if you don't know, because Obamacare has been passed. The Republicans seem not to want to fund that. The Democrats in the Senate say we do want to fund it. And we'll get I know it's coming. And it's been batted back to Congress, and this is where we are. Okay, Tom, what do you think of the government shutdown?
I love it.
You love it. Now, why is that?
I know that sounds rough. The government's entirely too bloated as it is. And to call this a government shutdown is kind of a misnomer, because only 17% roughly of the government is not working. Although the House just passed a bill yesterday that would guarantee the salaries of all furloughed workers once they come back. So they'll get their back pay.
So if you do like this, but you don't feel it's necessarily a government shutdown, what do you see happening to stop it? Because there are some things that are going to happen incrementally, certainly coming up to October the 17th.
Right. Well, I mean, October the 17th is when we hit $17 trillion in debt. There are economists out there that say once we hit the $17 trillion mark, it is mathematically impossible to ever repay that debt, just because of interest rates. And there's just, with the amount of, you can say the amount of money that's in the world, but most of the money that we have now is just, it's an idea now anyway. It's just numbers that have been thrown into various stock markets. But they say that it's mathematically impossible to repay that. $17 trillion for a country to be in debt is astronomical. And then, to me, I think that's unconstitutional. I just feel that it's absolutely wrong for a country to be $17 trillion in debt. So to me, shutting the government down per se is perfectly fine with me. Let's cut something somewhere.
But when October the 17th does come, that's going to be a big issue.
Sure.
Because then we've only got enough money to run for a few days, period. Then
Right.
everything shuts down.
Right.
So I guess if we're saying don't borrow any more money, we're pretty well done here.
Why don't we just make some cuts?
Well, I understand that. I do understand that. But it seems to me that at least the Republicans, and this does seem to be a party issue.
Absolutely, it's a party issue.
Absolutely. In the Congress, at this point, do not seem to want to fund Obamacare. They're
Right.
okay with funding everything else.
Right.
Just that.
Right.
Isn't there a bit of a problem with that, don't you think?
No, I don't think so at all.
Well, I think here's what the other side would say. When the House votes yes at that time, when the Senate votes yes at that time, when the Supreme Court says yes, it is constitutional to
As
do
a
that.
tax.
It's constitutional to do it. It's not going to go away, and your last ditch attempt is to just not fund it.
Okay.
But in not funding it, not only do you cause problem with that, but you cause problem with a lot of other things.
Well, let's back up a second. It don't necessarily cause problem with anything else. Had the Senate agreed, then everything else at its current spending level would have been funded. In fact, on Friday, the House sent a bill over to the Senate that would fund Obamacare, would fund the government, would fund Obamacare 100% at the current spending levels if the Senate would agree to take out the exemption for senators and federal employees from Obamacare, and the Democrats in the Senate still said no. So this is all about ramming something down the public's throat that they don't want. The the polling on Obamacare is running almost 70% of the country does not want this, and that's why the Republicans are standing strong on it.
Don't you believe? See, because here's what I am having a problem with. 70% polling, and we do these polls all the time. But the truth is that Obama was reelected, and one of the things that was heavily campaigned against him was Obamacare. If you go this way, it's going to be a big problem. And Romney said, the first thing I will do is repeal that. And he loses in a pretty landslide fashion in the last election.
That's not even close to a landslide. But
Well, in Electoral College it was. They called it up as soon as the West Coast went, a half hour. He didn't win Florida, he didn't win Ohio, he didn't win California.
right, the
didn't win New
Electoral
York.
College, though, is not necessarily a good snapshot of across the country.
But it's what we
if
have.
you talk popular vote, he just barely lost. It was 1 3/4% or so.
But if we talk popular, Al Gore was president in 2000.
There's no argument there.
But so we
I'm
go
just
with
saying
what we have.
Straight numbers. I'm just saying.
But we go with what we have.
Well, we go with what we have on how we elect the president.
Right.
And I agree that the Electoral College in 2000, put the switch the other way. But let's not say that it was a landslide vote when it was less than 2%.
Landslide in the Electoral College, which is how we elect presidents.
Well, that's how we choose which president wins. That's not how we necessarily elect the president.
And how is that?
Well, we're getting off topic.
But I say,
with,
but if
with
you
what
win
it
it,
is.
what's
But no, I
important because-
understand that the Electoral College is how they have it set up in order to actually determine who has won each state goes one way or another. But the fact of the matter is, the actual popular vote, he only won by less than 2%. So that's not a
Which is-
landslide.
No, but in most cases that's the case. I mean, the McCain-Obama election was not huge in the popular vote.
Right.
But in the Electoral College,
big.
Oh, it was
11
huge
o'clock
in the
over.
electoral college vote.
But that's what we do. So beyond that, though, beyond that. So Obama wins against a man who says, first thing I'm going to do is repeal Obamacare. Then the Congress, the approval rating of the Congress as a whole right now is at 10% for doing this. And they know, the people who are in these polls know what the issue is. It is Obamacare. Now, how can the polls say that if 70% of the people do not want it, then only 10% of the people are happy with the Congress for stopping because of it? Wouldn't they say, hey, that's great, you're stopping something we don't want?
You know, I don't know exactly how the polls were worded, but I can tell you that the polling that has shown 70% of the people that don't want this is absolutely strong. And Congress's approval rating is usually around 10%.
Well, it's definitely some since this.
Yeah.
It has always been around
sinking
10%.
from 12 to 10.
Well,
isn't that big of a hit?
But isn't that a sad thing, though, to say, because the Congress is mostly Republican?
Well, they have a majority, yes. I wouldn't necessarily say mostly, but they do have a majority in the
Well,
House.
what's majority? There are
In-
more
in
people
the House.
Republican than right,
Yeah.
and that's what we're talking about.
Well,
where the approval rating
Congress
is
is actually both houses. But
Well, but when they do this poll, this is basically based on the House, I believe.
okay, if you want to say it that way, that's fine.
I think it is.
Okay.
So the point again is why aren't they? Obama's ratings are falling, but certainly not at the rate
Okay.
that the Congress, well, let's include both Senate and House are. Why is that? If again the 70% oppose this whole issue.
I think you have too many people out there that have their hand out and they like the entitlement idea.
So why wouldn't the poll then again be more for Obamacare?
Depends on who you poll.
Right, which is what I'm saying. So I think polls are bad to talk about.
Okay.
So let's get back to the original
All right,
thing
we'll
here.
get back to facts.
Get back to facts. And the fact is that it has been passed. At that time,
Sure.
Congress, Senate, Supreme Court.
So are we going with the "it's the law of the land" argument?
Well, it is at this point,
Well,
until
so is-
somebody repeals it.
So is slavery.
But we took care of that.
I know, and that's what the House is attempting to take care of now.
No, the House is not, because the House is not voting to repeal it.
Actually, they
They're
voted
voting
to repeal it 62 times, and Harry Reid will not bring it up for a vote in the Senate.
Exactly.
If we want to go, yeah. Why
Which is-
are we not bringing that up for a vote in the Senate?
Well, that's something you'd have to ask him.
Well,
But that's
there
but
you
again
go.
in this. Well, I think the main reason is because in the Senate they know it would go down because the Senate
Okay.
is still predominantly
Let the vote
Democrat.
go. The reason he's not bringing it up for a vote is because he doesn't know he has the votes to win it. If he
That's,
knew he had the
that's
votes,
conjecture. I don't know that.
If he knew he had the votes, he'd take the vote.
Well, see, here's the problem, though. Again, that's conjecture. I mean, we can sit here and bat this around all
Sure.
day, but the problem becomes with this is that, whether you like it or dislike it, and I'm not exactly sure how people know yet because it's never been implemented. I would think if I hated this thing, if I truly, truly hated it, and knew exactly what it was going to be and felt that it was going to be just a catastrophe, that I would, if I'm a Republican and I'm sitting in the Congress, if I'm a senator and I'm sitting in the Congress, if I am a hopeful for president in the next election and I'm a Republican, I'm saying implement this thing. It will be such a disaster.
I'm with you there.
That, okay, so why fight it so much? Why just not let it whip out there, and then you are going to destroy the Democratic Party and everything they stand for, and for the first time in, my goodness, since 2004 really, you're going to be in good shape.
Well, I think that there's a difference in Congress between Republicans and true conservatives, and John Boehner is certainly not a conservative. John Boehner is going to do whatever is good for John Boehner, and he is showboating right now with this government shutdown, if we're going to call it that still. That's what he's doing, and he's making a stand on it right now, but you watch, he's going to cave, and we're going to end up with it getting implemented, and my hope is that it gets implemented sooner rather than later so that people can see absolutely how terrible it is, and we can take, the Senate back in 14.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think I don't understand this, because here is the thing. Yet people can say they want to repeal it, and people can say they want to go to the Senate, and they want to do this, and they want to call for the votes, and that's fine. That's how this country works. We do that a lot. Franklin Roosevelt was president for 4 terms until we decided we didn't like that.
Right.
Things changed. Slavery, you mentioned,
Sure.
until we decided we didn't like that. Then we
Right.
changed it. The problem here is that once you say it's okay, and it's obvious they've tried a lot of ways to stop this, going to the Supreme Court, saying, hey, and this, they knew that the Senate was never going to approve this budget, not funding that.
Right.
But in the process now, they have hurt people in their area, because there's not a congressman who doesn't have somebody on WIC in their
Sure.
area. There is not a congressman who doesn't have somebody going in for a trial who has cancer in their area. There is not somebody who doesn't have a national person working for the government who's not going to get a check, who doesn't have an air, especially in New York where the Statue of Liberty's closed, Yosemite's closed. Why do that all over this issue? If it was about, hey, let's repeal it, that's fine. You can have that argument. But just to defund it, knowing darn well that nobody is going to go back and say, let's do that.
Well, here's what my prediction is that's going to happen. John Boehner and the rest of the turncoats are going to cave on this issue, and they'll have it flipped completely back before anybody actually loses a paycheck. Because you have to realize, nobody has missed a check yet.
Not yet.
Nobody's missed anything yet. So we actually haven't done anything yet. All this is still for show because nothing's been done.
The next time, because I think this is what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with John Boehner. You know, he's an Ohio guy. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Unfortunately.
I don't know what's going to happen there. But the truth of the matter is if this keeps going on, if this type of politics on both sides keep going on, this country is never going to make any progress on anything. And the truth of the matter is, the next time that the Democrats don't like something the Republicans do, they're going to pull this. And they're going to say, oh, you know what, we're just not going to do that.
You know, I may not agree with whatever the future issue is that the Democrats would stop the government on, and you're just obviously, conjecturing on that.
Sure.
But whatever the issue is, I would love for the fact that somebody is going to stand on their principles, which the Republican Party is refusing to do most of the time. I love the fact that they're doing this and they're standing on their principles and they're saying, we're not going to fund this because we don't like it.
Right, but
And you have to realize, too, that the Supreme Court said that it is unconstitutional to force someone to purchase something. But if they were to call it a tax, then they could pass the entire law as a tax.
which is what the Congress and the Senate did when they were passing it through.
Well, actually, they didn't when they were passing it through. It's been changed since. When they passed it through, it was law, and now it's a tax.
Okay.
Those are two very different things. So we've had an end around.
Will
on
it come as
this.
a tax now?
Well, yeah, of course it will. The IRS is who's in charge of this thing.
Yeah. But the point, again, is, and we can talk about votes and changes, just like we can go back and say who pulled the ballot in 2000, who pulled the switch. But the problem is here is you can have these arguments, it would seem, when it's up for a vote. And
It
you
is
can,
up for a vote.
funding is up for a vote.
Right.
Yeah, but you know...
Is that not the same thing?
No. Well,
Sure
because
it is.
no, because repealing a law is different than stopping a
We
law.
have attempted to repeal the law. We've
Yeah, but-
attempted it 62 times, and Harry Reid won't play ball.
Right, but for example, say in a city, outrageously, obviously, let's bring it here to Marion right
Okay.
now. Our biggest problem is the heroin issue. If you watch any news program,
Okay. If you watch a news program,
okay.
yes.
Well, we ran a thing on the ballot last November to get more police officers in the city,
Right.
which passed.
Yep.
Okay, that is a done deal.
Sure. Where
now,
are they?
well, that's to be. You have to ask somebody else. That.
I
But the
know.
point is, what if the people who didn't like it, because it was a fairly close vote. You know,
Right.
it was like 53 to 47.
Okay.
It's not exact, but it was close enough
Yeah,
to be
roughly
that.
enough, yeah.
Okay, so what if the people who the majority has voted for it now,
Right.
and then that 47% says, okay, well, I understand that we voted to come back, but you know what? We're just not going to pay them. Which is essentially what we're doing here. We're not arguing the law, because even if the Senate had signed the bill saying, that's fine, we won't fund it, it is still in law. It's as if the budget would have come up and we said, well, we're not going to fund Social Security. Well, yes, people
Okay.
wouldn't have got their Social Security check, but Social Security doesn't go away. And if the next budget comes up in the next year and they decide they want to fund it again, it's still there to do that. They don't have to
Okay.
go through the rigmarole of passing a law again.
Okay.
They knew that this was going to happen. I mean, I think that's the wrongness of it. I don't mind people arguing it,
Okay.
and I don't mind if you want to cut here and cut there, because God knows they've done that with Social Security before.
Right, which is another issue. You know, why are we cutting Social Security? Why are we cutting veterans benefits and things of that nature when we have $17 trillion in debt that the vast majority of what we spend our money on it's just dumb stuff.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people would agree. There's a lot of pork, a lot of fat.
Absolutely.
All over.
And then why now that the government is quote unquote, shut down, why are we shutting down our national parks?
Good question.
Why are we going to hurt normal people? Why are we shutting down the World War II memorial so that the World War II veterans on honor flight can't go and see that? And then on top of that, why did we go out there and put barriers up and put 6 armed guards out there so that people can't come in, when that cost more than twice the amount that it would have cost to have just left the thing open? It's obviously pandering from the Democrats, trying to do the absolute most damage that they can do to the Republican Party through the media. That's all it is.
Well, I don't know. Again, that would be a conjecture. That's an opinion. I don't know.
Well, the numbers that I just gave you are fact.
Right, but the point is so what do you then define a government shutdown as?
Well, we're running at, over 80% still, so I'm saying we're pretty well not shut down.
But we did shut the national parks in the World War II, and
Again.
So what is that?
A trim back, a slow down.
Okay. So knowing this,
We're not shut down. We're still running at 83% of our government.
so knowing this, when October 17th comes, because this is not a long way off.
No, it's 11 days from today.
So on that point, then, when it would be everything after 3 days, if we don't fix that, goes away. Once that
Okay.
when that happens,
Mhm.
is that okay?
Yeah, why
That's
not?
okay to shut the country down
Sure.
completely.
Absolutely. If necessary, that's what you do.
And what happens to everybody? What happens to the people?
Define everybody.
Well, everybody who works for the government, everybody who's on a WIC program, everybody who's going in for cancer research, everybody who rides a city bus, everybody who works in local government,
Well,
everybody.
local government doesn't have anything to do with the feds.
Well, when the federal government closes up, though, you're going to have a terrible time funding education.
Why?
Because there is a federal office that does allocate money for this, and when you can't
Well,
get something passed through
Hold on,
the federal
hold on.
government,
Back up a
and
second.
defense is also a big issue.
Sure. At that point, and what we need to do is we need to go back to what the Constitution is.
But who's going to do this if the government's not there?
I would imagine that we would just continue using funny money to fund our legislature. It's the same funny money that we've been using since we went off the gold standard. You go back to funding the military, and that's it. Why not more? You say education, that money comes from somebody. That money comes from us. The government shuts down, we stop paying the money into the Fed, then we don't have to worry about when the money's coming back from. Keep the money local.
Well, let's talk about the things that are serious,
Okay.
like people's jobs, like army bases, like
Okay. Didn't I just say we would fund the defense?
well, but who's going to make that decision?
Well,
Because
Congress
obviously,
would. Congress will never stop getting a paycheck. We'll continue to have funny money.
I don't know about that. Because
Absolutely.
if you say though, the president's not going to go away,
Nope.
even though it's
Neither's
a federal job.
Neither's the
So,
Congress.
so if you say a minute ago that this is all pandering by the Democrats to hit the Republicans where it hurts most, don't you think that if it is funny money and that's what's going to happen and that's your opinion on what would happen on the 17th, don't you think that this Congress, which would take the blame, certainly in Obama's eyes and the Senate's eyes, don't you think that's the first thing they're going to defund and send home? And
Oh,
there's
of course. That's exactly what they're going to
that's
do.
so
I
there
didn't say
goes-
that's what that I wanted them to do. I said what they needed to do.
But back to the point that we never did get answered because we went off there.
Okay.
If the problem with this, I said you can argue it out all day long and you can say you don't like it and attacks in the Supreme Court and everyone wants to find loopholes in everything. But the problem is that when you purposely put up a budget that you know the other side is not going to pass, where is the compromise in this country?
Where's the budget? What budget are we talking about?
The budget that defunded Obamacare.
That wasn't a budget. That was a continuing resolution, which are unconstitutional.
Okay.
The president has given a budget to the Senate every year for 6 years that he has been out there, and it has not gotten one vote, not even Harry Reid's.
So
Not one.
why are we where we are now? The Congress
Because the
has
Senate
not voted for a
refuses
budget.
because the Senate refuses to pass a budget.
So, and what budget is that? Who came up with that budget?
The president comes up with that budget. Well, actually, for
So
the first 5
so-
years, he didn't produce a budget at all.
So the president produced a budget this year that defunded his own Obamacare.
No, the president produced a budget that the Senate voted on, and it went down 96-0.
Right. So where did this thing now that the Congress has sent over to
What
the
we're
Senate
having
come
now is
from?
what they call continuing resolutions, which are unconstitutional.
But now we're talking semantics.
No, we're not talking
We're
semantics.
talking semantics.
What we are
because-
is we are saying because the president and the Senate can't seem to figure out how to pass a budget, we're going to continue funding government at the same level that we always have.
Right, excluding what? For the first time, the biggest thing to come into
Well,
the government.
this time, yes, but the last 5 years there have been continuing resolutions, which again
So
are
why
not
didn't the government
constitutional.
shut down the last 5 years?
Because we passed a continuing resolution.
Right. And isn't that the problem, though, with the politics today, that nobody can agree on anything?
Well,
Did they not?
no.
Did the Congress not know this was coming?
Yeah,
I mean,
of
this
course
was
Congress-
voted.
Well,
Right.
again, the
So-
House has voted 62 times to repeal this, and when the Senate refuses to vote on it, they'll just pull the plug on it. Problem solved.
Do you think it will go away
Obamacare?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
this year?
No.
No. You think it's going to hit?
Yeah, I think it will.
So
It'll hit
then,
next year.
So you saying that as a Republican, I think would you qualify yourself?
I,
So
I
then what-
qualify myself as a conservative.
Conservative. So then what is the point? If you sit here and believe that yes, it's going to go through, and you said earlier on in this interview that let it fall on its own weight,
Let
and
it
that John Boehner's going to flip and flop and go
He
back
will.
the other way anyway. So why are we doing this?
We're doing it because they're attempting right now to stand on principle.
And what is that going to gain them in the end?
Well, my hope in the end is that they will, the Republicans or the conservatives that have stood on the principle, we will be able to look back and say that what's going to happen is Boehner's going to flip on this, and he's going to take about 23 or 24 of the Republicans with him. The rest of those individuals then would, in my opinion, be eligible for re-election. Anybody who turns code on this and becomes a traitor to the United States and goes against the Constitution on this needs to be voted out of office.
And what if it does go in, which you say it will?
I think it'll go into implementation,
Okay.
and then the Democrats are going to lose 8, maybe
But-
7 seats in the House, in the Senate next year, and we'll completely get rid of it because they'll see what of a debacle that
And
is.
I don't think a member of the news media or anybody in the country would have a problem at that point, because
well,
that's
the news
how.
media is a whole different
Well, that's fine.
story.
But that's because that's how it's supposed to be done. That's what's supposed to happen.
And
you
I
don't
think that's
like
what's
it,
going to happen.
but what we're doing now is not.
No,
what's
what we're
supposed
doing
to
now
happen.
is standing on principle.
Right.
And the
And-
news media is not covering the truth.
Well, whose truth are you talking about?
We're
though?
talking truth.
Well, yeah, right. But I understand when you get into the generalities of government. We can go back a long way and talk about generalities, and we can talk about it's a continuing resolution, and the Supreme Court did not do this, and then it was changed on this, and there are technicalities all along the way. But the general truth of the matter is, it's much like a lot of the issues that come up in our lifetime. After we can go all the way back to the Civil War. When the Civil War was over, slavery was supposed to be abolished, but it wasn't. In the generality, they just didn't call it that. They put up poll taxes, and people in this country were always supposed to be able to
We
vote.
got rid of those.
Right, we eventually did, but it took
We
a
did.
long, long time.
Sure.
Women into the 1900s. It took most African Americans into the 1960s. We have been lagging on many things.
Okay.
And all the time, Social Security. Most people don't realize Social Security wasn't always there. It didn't come around till the 1940s.
Right.
So the big issue here
I
is.
still, but we'll
But the
back
po-
up a minute.
what I'm saying
Social
is-
Security, I still don't think is a good program either.
But that's everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Nobody's not saying that. But what I'm saying is that that's what's supposed to happen. Bring Obamacare in because we have voted on that. We have done that. The Supreme Court has said what they've said, and this is the legislation that's here. Do that. And you know what? If it crumbles and people hate it and the country goes into this debt, then yes, of course they will vote out their senators. And
Absolutely.
of course So what we're doing now, though, is just grandstanding. You call it stand on your own principle. That's fine to stand on your own principle, and you can vote against it every time it comes up.
And I hope
But
the true
when
conservatives do.
But it's a funding issue. It's not. If you want to trim another program to fund Obamacare a little bit, and then you want to say, well, let's do this, let's do
So
that.
why
let's
don't
do
we
this.
trim Obamacare to fund another program?
Because it is a new thing, and I think to go into full implementation without having it funded fully would not be an accurate depiction of what it is.
So we're going to defund something else in order to fund Obamacare.
I don't know that to be an absolute truth because I think there's a lot of pork on all the sides.
Sure.
But the truth of the matter is what if it is a success?
Well, it
This-
won't be.
Well,
There's
that's fine.
absolutely no
Well,
way.
that's okay. But what if it is? Because people said the same thing about Medicare and Social Security.
Which are both bankrupt.
But they're both still here, and if you
Yeah,
tried
they're
to
both bankrupt.
if
And
you
that
took
it-
Social Security away from senior citizens today, we would have a serious problem.
Absolutely. But if you stopped it for the new people coming into the workforce, in the next 40 years, we could make our debt half of what it is now.
But what do you do between now and then to the people who every day are turning 65, who now have
What do you
nothing?
mean?
What?
Who funds it?
Yeah, who gives them the money?
Well, didn't they pay into it in order to get their own money?
Well,
That's exactly how it should have worked, but it's not going to work that way.
Well, it's an interesting discussion, and I think it's going to go on, but I do think you have it right, because I do think Obamacare is eventually going to come in. And what it does, I don't know. I can't give 100% that it's not going to work. Will be what happens will happen.
What happens
And we'll
will
see what
happen.
happens. And it could be a big win for Democrats, or it could be a big win for the Republicans. But right now, things are closed, and that is sad. And October 17th is going to be a big day, especially if we keep the doors shut that long.
Yeah.
Which I don't. If in the end,
It'd have to go past the 15th for the first person to miss a check.
if in the end you say it's going to go through anyway, then this has been 17 days of just standing there saying we don't like it.
Okay, we stand on your principles.
But is that okay?
Absolutely.
And if the Democrats do it on something the Republicans put forth, you're okay with that as well?
If they're standing on principle, yes.
Okay. It's always an interesting conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think this has been a fun one, and God
I
knows
think
there's
so.
nothing more pertinent right now.
Yep.
Tom Oyster, always fun to have on the program, and he will be back quite a bit, which is going to be a lot of fun because a lot of things going on. There are some small elections coming up in November, which we will get to. But for this episode of Scott Spears Now, this is Scott Spears.